All right, here we go. Let's get back to the original problem that I'm having charging the Bluetti. For those of you that are kind of wondering what's going on, or maybe new to the channel, a lot of people want to use these scooter batteries. Each one has 440 watt hours, I believe it is, 440 or 460. I think it's 440. Anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I've got 4 more, so I've got 8 of those total. But what a lot of people are wanting to do is bundle those up into bricks of 4 and use them to double the power of the Bluetti. So the Bluetti now will last that much longer. So the problem that I'm having is that when I plug them in, they initially start charging, and they start charging very well. And then they slowly start to drain down. So let me just demonstrate that to you. We'll try it again today. Someone had also suggested, what if you've got a load going on your Bluetti, some kind of load going out, at the same time you're trying to charge in? Will that make any difference at all? So in keeping that BMS active or what have you. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and hook this thing up and we'll get it going. I'll show you what we got going. Okay. This is a battery box that I made last year with 3 of Jag 35's scooter batteries from last year. It's just a wooden box. I wired them all in parallel. I'm using the BMS to charge it, and I'm using just the full battery posts to discharge it. So I put a meter on there. I can convert it down to 12 volt. And then I've got me some ports down here. And with that, I've just used a small Bestech 300 watt inverter. And we've had power outages. We've been able to run lights and TV and everything with that little arrangement. But anyway, for today, we're going to be charging it with the 3 amp charging brick. So we're going to charge this battery off the Bluetti. So our output is 275 watts. And at the same time, we're going to, as suggested, plug in the battery. I've got 2 batteries here. I can quickly throw on my homemade meter. That one's at, can you see it? 38.6. This one here, 38.4. So we'll take the larger one. And all we should have to do here is hook it up to the Bluetti. A lot of people are asking me why I'm using this. I don't know. I guess because I have the spark arrestor, and it's working for me. So we plug it in part way. We let it sit. You know, before we do that, I want my meter in line too. I want to be able to keep an eye on the battery voltage. Okay, now we step up to the Bluetti and see what's happening. There we go, starting to recognize it. 451 watts. At the same time, we've got 275 going out. Let's go ahead and go into our data, into our inverter, into our PV. Okay, now let's write this down. And I'm going to start my timer. So, not to prolong this, we'll pop back in 30 minutes and see where we stand. And we'll see if those values are going down. All right, we're coming up on the half-hour mark. A few minutes out. You are not going to believe it. It is actually working. Let me just show you what's going on up here. We're starting to get a little bit of a voltage sag. We're below that 35 volts that the Bluetti requires. And it's still working. Still 11.9 amps, 395 watts. I think that's a success. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this down. We're close enough to the half hour. So we've got 33.2 volts, 11.9 amp, 395 watts. And let's see, we were at a 44%. Let's just see what we got up to. Now we're at 50%. And you can see we're still drawing off 275 watts to charge up this battery out here. So, based on this, now it's working. Now, is it working because we've got a discharge going out to something else? At the same time, we've got this input coming in. Is it working because the JAG 35 activator boards are better? It's working on one battery. Now, we tested it before parallel on two batteries, so let's start breaking down and figuring out why it's working. The first thing I'm going to do, see, we're down to 30, getting down to 31 volts on that one battery. I think the first thing I'm going to do is take out the charging and now try the same test for a half hour on this one battery without the output. And we'll see if it holds the wattage for 30 minutes. Now let's just go back and check that because we're coming up on the 30-minute mark. Look at that. Holding the wattage with one battery. So, we'll see what happens. Okay, here we go. Just to make things consistent, I went ahead and unplugged the charger, the discharge charger. I went and turned off the Bluetti so that it'll reboot just for consistency. Now it's showing 51%. We'll go ahead and go over to the data inverter, PV inverter, and we'll plug it together to the second battery. Okay, plugged it into the second battery, the bottom one. 38.4, it's showing 40 up there. It must be upping the voltage somewhat. And we started our timer. And we are starting off with 37.7, 11.9, 446 watts. Okay, and we are at a 51% state of charge. All right, now, what was happening before is this thing was dropping. In a half hour, it would go down to, well, between 9 and 20 watts. The amperage was very low, like 1 amp. So we'll see what's going to happen here over the next half hour with just one battery and no output discharge. Okay, I missed my mark a little bit. We are at the 32-minute mark. We have the battery itself plugged in directly. We have no load on the Bluetti, and you're not going to believe this. It worked again. This battery is getting a little bit low, so you see it starting to wane off a little bit. But we are at 32.5 volts, 11.9 amps, 386 watts. And that was at a half hour. So, I'm stumped. Man, why is it working? All right, what can I do next? All right, at 72 volts, it was not working. It was waning down. So I guess the next step, since I have these connectors on here, I'll get these charged both back up to a similar range. And then we'll try the 72 volt with each one of these on one leg. We'll use that adapter. And we'll try it again with 72 volts and see if we can repeat the test that we did before where it waned down in a half hour. So I'm completely stumped. But it's working, and I'm glad it's working. Well, what did we do to get this BMS working? Was it because we had discharge power at the same time? We were drawing off the 250 watts? I don't know. But I'm glad it's working. But we got to get this battery off of here. We don't want it to drop down below. I'm calling 30, but some people say 28, so 25. But I'm going to drop mine down to 30. So anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully next we can do the 72 volt. Okay, we are going to do the 72 volt test again. Now that this Bluetti appears as though it's working, why I don't know, but we're going to do that test again. So the first thing, let's get our Bluetti turned on. We'll let that boot up. We have our two dongles coming down from our two batteries. We'll just do a quick test on those. I did charge them up. .4 volts in one, 40.4 volts in the other. So now what we'll do is we'll run the series connection into that, and you can see I've got them labeled 1 and 2 in the main, plus the connectors are different too, so there's no way you can mess this up. Now we should have 72 volts, or in this case 80 volts coming out. 81.1 volt. The only other thing that we've got is this arrestor. Now let's turn our attention back to the Bluetti for a second. You'll see that we are not at full charge. If you can see that, gosh, it's not a very good... it says 66%. You can see that. So let's go ahead. Now this particular gauge wire here is probably only 14. So we'll see how this is going to go. If this heats up, I may decide to go ahead and pull out my little meter. But we'll just see how this goes. The spark arrestor, you plug it in part way and you let that sit for a little bit. Before you plug it in completely. Still got a little pop. I guess I'm just not letting it go long enough. Alright, let's pay attention to our Bluetti now. And let's go ahead and get to our data page. Inverters, PV inverter. You can see it's registering the voltage. Now, what happened before was we started off with about 80 volts. We started off with about this same amount of wattage and amperage. And then over the next half hour, it slowly drew down. And it drew down to 9 watts or to 0 watts. So what we need to see now is I had a viewer actually say, hey, why don't you add a load to it at the same time you're charging it? So that's what I did. I added a 250 watt load to it, and everything seemed to turn around and start working. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do this 72 volt test. We're going to time it. We're going to come back in a half hour and see. And I'll be honest with you, it appears like it's going down already. So we started out at 200 and some watts, and now we're already down to 148 or whatever. And when Jehu did this demonstration at 72 volts, his was drawing almost 700 watts, which I think is the limit through the PV side of this thing. So, I mean, based on this, it's already drawing down right now. I'm almost thinking I should go ahead and plug in a load to it and see if it will actually pop up to 700 watts. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so what I've done, you can see I've plugged in here. I've plugged in this 3 amp charger. It's a 42 volt charger, and I've got that plugged into my battery box that I made last year for charging. We'll remember these values, 140 watts. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on this port over here, and we'll see what kind of difference it makes. %, state of charge, 132 watts going in. I'm going to turn the AC on. You can see on the AC side of things, we're actually drawing more than 250. We're drawing 275 watts. Well, I was kind of hoping that this would pop up. And it's not. If anybody knows anything about any updates to the ROM or anything, please let me know that. Okay, well, I guess here we are. I got a load of 250 watts on there, charging up this battery over here through this 3 amp charger. We are hooked up and putting, well, not putting much into it, so this isn't even getting warm. We're only putting 100 watts into it now. And we're at the 4-minute mark. So you can see it's come down quite a bit already. So it looks like today it's not going to work. That is just crazy. Okay, we'll check back in the 30-minute mark. Well, okay, here's an update. We're at the 15-minute mark. And I'm definitely disappointed. My 2 batteries here, my dongles are working. Says I'm putting out 80 watts. And look what's happening. Now we're right back to the same problems we were having prior to yesterday. You can see here that the amps and the watts are dropping. We're only at 15 minutes, and it's already dropped from 200 and something down to 57. So it looks like, and we also have this load going, this 250. I can back out. 275 watt load running out of it too. So we're back to having the original problem. You plug it in, it's got an initial charge, which is fairly healthy, and then over the next half hour it starts to taper down. And so by the time you get to a half hour, 45 minutes, there's no charge going into the Bluetti. Now yesterday I thought I broke that cycle. I thought I got onto something. One of the viewers had suggested that I do a load at the same time. So what I did is I took one battery with a dongle and put it into the Bluetti, and at the same time I powered this same brick to charge this. And that seemed to kick in. Now all of a sudden I'm running 400 watts out of one battery. It's charging 400 watts, over 400 watts, consistently. A half hour later it was still at 400 watts. So I thought we broke the cycle. So what I did then is I took off and went to the second battery without the load. And it continued to work. So I thought, hey, we got this thing going now. For whatever reason, the BMS has kicked in and working. All I did is shut off the power to this thing and let it set overnight, and came back and revisited it today, and now we're back to our same issue all over again. So we let this thing, it's at 17 minutes now. If we let that go to the full half hour, I already know what I'm going to see. This wattage is going to drop down to 9 watts, and I'm going to have hardly any load at all. Here with two batteries at 72 or 80 volts. Yesterday I was running 400 watts out of one battery. Today out of two I'm running 41. So I'm going to go ahead and call this test. I'm going to try one more time and go back to my original configuration yesterday, which seemed to break the cycle, and see if we can break that cycle again. So stay tuned. Okay, and this is how I did it yesterday, which actually I thought got it to work properly. One battery, through the dongle, 39 volts, into the Bluetti, and look at that. Look at that. Did I break the cycle? Let's restart this. And let's find out. Let's come back and revisit this. Sure seems to be doing pretty darn good with just one battery and a 275 watt load. In fact, speaking of that 275 watt load right here, let's go ahead and unplug that. See if we can maintain this over 400 watts for the next half hour. Here you go. Looks good to me. All right. We'll check back. Okay, so guess what? We're at 25 minutes, roughly, 24 minutes. It seems to be holding pretty doggone well. You hear the fan on the Bluetti coming on. But we're holding above that 400 watts for one battery. And now the thing's working. Okay, good morning. Let's see what's going to happen this morning. Turn the Bluetti on and get that thing booting up. I did put a charge into our two batteries last night. You might want to see here. Oh, 38.2. Didn't quite get them full, but I got them up there. And 38.2. So what we'll do this morning is we'll forget about the 72 volt conversion for right now. We will just worry about one battery for now. Our Bluetti has 58%. Let's go ahead and put that to the data page with the inverters so we can begin to monitor that. Get my camera set up here for you. Come on, there you go. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and plug one battery in. And we will start our timer. Now, if my suspicions are true, and this does not work, then it won't come up with, oh, look at that, 450 watts. Doggone it, now this thing seems like it's going to work. Before it was a lower wattage, and it would drop real quick into the 200s. So it appears that this thing is turned on. The BMS is working. I guess that's a good thing. I guess the only thing I could try now, I could try the 72 volt again, but we know that one's not working. I could try hooking 4 of my batteries in parallel, see what that does. Anyway, let's let this run for at least 15 minutes. Make sure that it's not going to drop down into the 200 watt range. That tells us that it's obviously dropping voltage again, or dropping wattage again, not working. So stay tuned. I'll be right back in 15 minutes. All right, it's been 15 minutes, and I would say this thing is working. Well, that is terrific, I guess. I can't get it to not work anymore. But when I first started doing all these series of testings, it was not working correctly. So you see it's holding here at 414 watts. Now the input voltage is starting to sag, 34.8. And you see down here on my battery, 33.6. So, man, I guess whatever I did, I turned it on. And now it's working correctly with one battery. I think what I'll do before I close this off and call it a video is, you remember I charged them up last night to 38.5. Well, now I've drawn this one down. I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and charge up this one to a similar voltage of this one. We'll do the 72 volt test one more time, and then we'll call it quits. Okay, here we go. 72 volt, the last attempt. You can see here, I've now charged my battery up. We're at 38.4 on one, 38.2 on the other. I guess that's close enough. Got our dongles on each leg. Here is my 72 volt connection. You can see 1 here, 2 here, 3 here. 1, 2. Now let's check this voltage. $76.9. And we now hook it into the Bluetti. It's still a pretty loud pop. I don't know. Even with using that thing. All right, let's see what happens. Well, I have to tell you, it's a lot higher than it was before. It seemed to me like it was 288 before, within minutes. Let me start the timer. All right, we'll come back here in 15 minutes. Oh, there's my 280. So it's starting to go down already. So we'll come back in 15 minutes and we'll see what it does. Okay, there you go, 15 minutes. You can see my 2 batteries in series are holding out well. 75.6 volts. And remember, we can take this all the way down to 60 easily. Look how disappointing that is. 78 watts. So in 15 minutes time, it's come from 400 watts down to 78. So it can't even hold on to the higher charge. And you see it slowly will trickle down. There's no sense in even going another half hour or another 15 minutes on this, because you can see what it's doing. I mean, 70 watts. In another 15 minutes, it'll be 9 watts. So we've seen this song, heard this song before, so we know what it's doing. So anyway, I think I'm going to call it a wrap. What have I learned from these things? I've learned that the Bluetti was not working. I could not use it on one battery. I could not use it in series with 72 volts, or 80 volts rather. It just wouldn't take it. In the beginning, when I started this, it would run down. And within a half hour, I'd be down to nothing. 45 minutes, nothing. So whatever I did at the suggestion of a viewer, thank you for whoever suggested plug a load into the system at the same time you're charging, because that seemed to do it. I put about a 275 watt load into the system to charge a battery, and that seemed to break loose the BMS for whatever reason. So now it seems to be working on one battery, but it will not work on 2 in series. So the one battery seems to hold in a pretty good discharge, about 450 watts. So I'm going to leave it there. I'd love your comments, concerns, questions below. If you've got one that's doing the same darn thing as mine, I'd appreciate it. And maybe try that on yours. Maybe try to charge off one battery and at the same time discharge as much or almost as much as what you're pulling in. See what happens. So thanks again. Best of luck. Take care. Enjoy your day.